Welcome to the Care Right podcast, your go-to resource for all things elder care. Guiding us through this journey is Annalee Kruger, the founder of Care Right Incorporated, and she has been steadfastly supporting families across the United States. Each episode brings you expert insights, innovative strategies, and practical advice, ensuring that you're well equipped to provide the best possible care for your loved ones. Expect to gain valuable knowledge, learn from real-life stories, and get inspired to take action in your own caregiving journey. So buckle up as we dive into an in-depth discussion of elder care planning and together embrace the journey of caring for aging loved ones on the Care Right podcast.
Hello, everyone. This is Annalee Kruger with Care Right Incorporated. We work with family caregivers all across the country in developing aging plans via facilitating family meetings, finding out what's working well, what's working less well, what are the goals, what are the financial resources, current care options, future care options, all the way through dementia progression consulting, and all the way through the dying and death process as well. Just a very much white glove approach concierge model with families all across the country. So typically who comes to us are burned out family caregivers, and they're realizing that what they're doing is not safe or sustainable in any kind of way. So one of the things that we encounter at Care Right is just a lot of grieving families, and we join in families' journeys wherever they are, wherever they live, and wherever they are in the caregiving, aging, and dementia journey. Oftentimes, families are coming to us because the primary family caregiver passed away, and now the kids are like, oh my goodness, what do we do with dad because mom took care of him? I wanted to what I did was I put a post on Facebook and said, hey, I want to normalize the conversation around grief. And after that one post on Facebook, a whole bunch of people responded to that and said, you know what, I want to share my story. I want to talk about what my situation is, my grief journey, what I'm doing that's helping me through my grief journey, different things that people might have said or done that were really helpful. And then on the converse side, some things of maybe not what things that weren't helpful at all, just because we know that grief is a really tricky conversation to have. And a lot of us don't talk about our grief journey because it's so uncomfortable for people to hear or acknowledge or want to participate in, because most people don't know what to say. And so thought we would just have these beautiful ladies here introduce themselves, their grief story, and then just kind of take the conversation from there and see where it all goes. But the goal is to just start the grief conversation, help the listeners understand grief a little bit better. Everyone's journey is unique, and then just kind of things that you're doing on a daily or weekly or however often basis to help you through grief, and maybe some pointers on things that really aren't helpful. Okay, so we'll do this part round robin just so that we're, getting everyone their story, ability to say their story. So Brittany, do you want to go first?
Sure. I'm Brittany. I've kind of gone through several different stages and different types of grief. Back in 2018, I unexpectedly lost my mother, which was something we didn't see coming. I expected, if anything, something would happen to my father because he had cardiovascular disease, multiple heart attacks, and strokes. But at 62 years old, my mom had a sudden massive hemorrhagic stroke and passed away. I happened to be the one in the home at the time when it happened. I just had surgery the day before, and my parents were taking care of me. But I had to make the 911 call, and all of a sudden decisions, especially realizing in that moment that my dad had dementia and mom was hiding it. I thought she had it. I knew she had kind of early onset. I didn't see it in dad. I somehow missed that. So it was having to deal with losing her suddenly and then take care of dad full time, not go home after mom passed. And did about almost 6 years of caring for my father, the last 3 years of 24/7 care. going through the grief of kind of my life too, of giving up that, trying to have a family, marriage, kind of put that on the back burner to take care of my father. And I lost him last week. Um, that was a completely different type of grief. It was anticipatory. I knew that it was coming. I can't say that that makes it any easier. Definitely, I think I've been able to hold it together because it was like what was going on. But very hard to, at not even 35 years old, have lost both of my parents.
Yeah, that's tough. And just unexpected and just kind of back to back grief like that, back to back losses like that. Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you for
Yeah, of
sharing.
course.
Jennifer.
Oh, yeah. Well, I've had a couple different experiences with grief. One was my dad, who passed away from complications of a stroke back in 2019, and that was really painful for me. I was not taking care of myself. I was trying to take care of him, and for about 3 or 4 months before he passed. And I actually, because I was in such grief, ended up in the hospital myself. The doctor said I was literally heartbroken, and so it made it so that I actually wasn't able to be there when my dad finally passed. And so that was really challenging. Um, and then my most recent experience has been with my mom. And, with my dad, I was able to kind of move through the grief process after he passed. But with my mom, she was the caretaker of my stepdad who had dementia. And similar to Brittany's story, we didn't realize my mom was actually masking her own dementia symptoms. And so after he passed, it became really clear that that's what was going on. And so because she lived in Washington State and I lived in Texas and my sister was in Montana, we had to move her suddenly, here because she couldn't stay in this big, huge home by herself. And so we moved her, and the move plus the grief plus everything just completely made her spiral into extreme dementia.
Yep.
Whereas, we thought she could do independent living, and she went from independent to assisted living to memory care within just a few months, like literally 3 months. And so it's just been grieving the loss, at each stage, and just little things like, and I don't think a lot of people talk about, they say dementia, it's like, oh, you're just losing, they just slowly lose their memory. But I didn't know that she could become angry. She could, call me names. There could, it's just like a stab in the heart when that's coming from your own mom. So, and just even now when I'm visiting her in memory care, there's just the little things, like she lost her ring. And so I had to take that away from her because, it's like, oh my gosh, I got in the car and I was like, I can't believe I had to take away my mom's wedding ring, not that, I couldn't have helped it, but I had to because she was going to lose it. Or just she used to kind of fight back and not want to be there. And now she's okay with it. And I thought, oh, great, but as you're leaving, you're like, wait, I'm sad now because my mom isn't fighting back. Like that's her personality. She should be fighting back. And so just, every time it's a new experience and a new grief. So that's kind of where I'm at right now. So just never know what you're going to experience when you go and visit and leave. And yeah.
And it's hard either way, because you're losing your mom as her dementia progresses, and you're losing who you know her to be.
Right.
Yeah. Mary.
So in 2018, my children lost three grandparents in a 5-month period. And I have to tell you, one of my favorite slogans now is the grief is the price we pay for love, right? Because those folks, in reflecting were, just amazing, right? And I feel in their 80s, right, lived a good life. And I feel like that's sort of what you would hope, right, circle of life would look like. So lives well lived, obviously we wanted them to live forever, but those are the ones that I miss and want to call all the time. But I think that that's in my mind, or going through therapy, that's sort of a healthy grief to have. What I really wanted to highlight today was I was estranged from my mother for many years. We had sort of I'm an only child, and we had a turbulent upbringing where I felt like I had a lot of abandonment issues. Again, other family members sort of jumped in, but had abandonment issues with my mom. Then when I had children 25 years ago, I really wanted to put up a little bit of that wall. And I kept thinking that, older folks were grandmama like, and that she would come around and, she would then be the way that my fantasy would have had my mom be to my children. And unfortunately, that never happened. And so the grief that has surprised me is in 2021, she died, ended up dying from COVID. She had made some really bad decisions in her life and surrounded herself with people that, she had different men in and out of her life for her entire life. And so she had surrounded herself with folks that, weren't looking out for her best interest, and so just that guilt now of, could I have done more at times, just because, the 50 years that I did live with her, I was often embarrassed by not having a mother-daughter loving relationship, or that of my kids having that lovable grandmother. So at times, I feel relief that I feel like the easy button is, well, she's passed, as opposed to like having to explain that. But wow, lots of stuff that comes with unexpected sadness of, the ifs, the woulda, coulda, shouldas, just wish it would have been different, and so that's what I'm hoping, that maybe some people can get a different perspective on that, and learn some things and help some others maybe that might be going through that as well. So I appreciate the opportunity.
Sure. Yeah. Mary Ann.
Well, unlike everybody else here, the main grief that I experienced in my life happened very young. I was widowed at the age of 24. My husband was killed in an automobile accident, and I was actually out of town when it happened. And my mother-in-law had to be the one to call me to tell me he was in an accident. I couldn't fly home until the next morning, and he had died after surgery. So coming home to start planning a funeral was the last thing I ever expected to do. And it was hard. This was back in the late 70s, when there was no social media, no internet. Any support groups were all based for older women, people my grandma's age. And I remember comments at the funeral home. Oh, you're young. At least you didn't have children. You'll meet somebody new. God has a plan. And none of that helped at all. And I know that I probably had said those things before I went through the experience. But now that's one of the things I tell people. Just leave the platitudes alone. Don't even share them. The best thing that you can do for someone who is grieving is to listen. Let them talk, acknowledge their story, because that's really what I needed to do. And I know that when I started dating again, that was a whole nother crazy story, because any man I met what, you're widowed? What? I was like, I was 25, and most of them just got scared. But the man I ended up marrying for number 2, Jim, was on our first date, he asked me about my husband. He asked me to tell him about Bob. So I knew that it takes a lot to be able to have someone speak about someone who's dead. And he understood that made me who I am. And I just love him for that, because the grief is all part of who I am, and it's still evolving. And any other challenge that I've come up against, it's just a different grief, needing to go out and get a job when my second husband got injured, and life not being the way I imagined it. People, like what Mary was saying about the relationship with her mom, that not what you expected at all. Or the fantasy of what you had hoped. Yeah. But I think that's pretty much what I want to share right now.
Okay. So I'll share my mom had vascular dementia, and long story short, in the memory care facility that she was at, they served her the wrong diet and she choked to death. And so obviously it was very unexpected. And I'm angry because the incompetence of the healthcare workers that were assigned to her took what I call my death plan that I had for my parents or for my mom away from me, because I envisioned that I would do with my mom what I do with my clients, which is be at their bedside and hold their hand and sing and pray and do whatever it is that gives them comfort and peace, and help the families navigate, this is what the dying process looks like, give permission and say what you need to say now, and clear the air and all that kind of stuff. I envisioned that would be my parents' death plan, that I would be able to have the honor and the privilege of being there when either of my parents, and for sure both of them, pass away. And it's just, not gonna lie, I'm angry every day that she had to die that way. And so that's one of the reasons I wanted to do this grief podcast, is to just give anybody on this Zoom who wants to share what their story is and how you're coping. For me, when you're also the caregiver to the surviving spouse who clearly did not expect to be an instant widow like that, like a completely unexpected widow, you're also supporting and helping comfort that person who's just in shock when these two people were truly lovebirds from like high school through, like, they were married 63 years. So I think there's something to be said for helping other people in your family and supporting them and grieving them, and then being able to sometime be able to quietly grieve. So I would help my dad, for example, but then after he would go, because he lived with me at the time, and so when he would go to bed, he was probably doing the same thing I was. I was going into my bedroom, sobbing into my pillow quietly so that I wouldn't upset him. But I'm sure he was doing the exact same thing. And so how, so one of the things I did was I created a mom memorial table in my living room. And I'm sorry, my blinds are like, this is the time of day in Florida that I get like zebra hair. But anyway, so what I did for me was I just created a mom memory table or memorial table. And I have her picture, several pictures, some of the pictures from her room in the memory care unit. We always sang "You Are My Sunshine," and so I have like a "You Are My" the "You Are My Sunshine" picture that I had in her memory care room. I cut a lock of her hair, so I have that on there. We played hours and hours and hours of Uno because she was still really good at that. So I have a deck. I have the deck of Uno cards that we played with. So I have like all these memorable things. And then my friends got me some gifts too, like a wooden angel, like "You're always in my heart," so things like that that are really meaningful too. One of my neighbors got me a little wood music box that you wind up and it plays "You Are My Sunshine." So that's the kind of stuff that I have on the memory table. What, if anything, I just want to say this too, because I think this is really important. So, like in a care facility, when your loved one dies, you have to do what's called vacate the room, right? Because you need to clean it out, get rid of all your loved one's stuff so that they can flip it to then bring in the new admission, the new person that's going to live there. So you don't even get the opportunity to really take your time doing that either. Because it's like, they're like, well, how soon can you empty out the room? Because we've got someone, I mean, this is how cold it is. Like this, you need to clean this out because we need someone else to take this room. And so they take, sometimes these facilities take that away from you as well. So what are some different things that maybe you've done? Like I've done my mom table. What are some things that maybe you've done that kind of help with that?
I guess mine's a little different because I'm still, in the grieving process. But, I'm glad you brought up anger because I was really angry at first and I was in denial, I don't want this to be happening, and so I kind of had to move into more the acceptance part of it. And also just because I'm visiting her often, um, I really had to sort of compartmentalize as like, okay, here's my time with my mom. And depending on the day, it's going to be a good day or it's going to be a sad or hard day. And then I had to just get in my car, grieve it all out, and then be like, okay, this is where I kind of can grieve. And then I kind of go do my other part of my life. It's like I kind of had to split it. Not to say that I don't ever think about her,
Right.
on a daily basis, or if a song comes on in the grocery store, I might break down, but I've sort of had to do that. And I also tried to turn it into more of a positive thing, as far as it's like, okay, I can use what I've learned and my experiences to help other people and to help them through the same situation or experiences. Because of what I do, I'm able to do that for people. And so to turn it more into a positive has really helped. And then also to have just the one person, like I can call my sister and we can talk about it. And because she understands, I mean, she's in Montana, so she's far away. So I'm like the only person here. But if I call her, she knows, and, she knows my mom. We FaceTime with my mom. So having that one person that you can really talk to about it is very helpful.
Yep.
I can share, and I'd like to compare like a little story of like two planning or not planning. And my grandpa and my grandma, they had made all of their arrangements ahead of time. They had this beautiful bench in this beautiful park-like setting that has their name on it and their ashes are inside. And so my children and I visit birthdays, holidays, all of that. We really just feel so connected with them. We've done some other things to sort of memorialize, but it's like, we're going to go see Pop. Let's go have lunch at his favorite place. And then we'll go sit on Pop's bench and do something. And what I want to say is that, for people that don't think it matters or just, whatever they do with my body, it doesn't matter to me. I'm gone at that point. Without having the conversation, it really does put a lot of stress and questions on your loved one, because the opposite tail of that is my mother, who past was with a man who had control of all of her belongings. I was never allowed to have access or take a peek or see any of that. He said, well, I don't want her body. I don't want anything to do with that, like donate her to science or whatever, and so I wasn't going to do that. I went and wrote the check to do what I had to do to collect these ashes. But, never once did I know where she wanted to be or what to do with her. And, it was a couple years that she was in my house taking up for like 6 months, she was in the back seat of my car with a seatbelt on, and I didn't know what to do with her. And then I brought her in, we made up a little bit, and I brought her ashes in. And then, it's just like not something that I wanted to walk by every day, And so if someone's sort of listening that just doesn't think that it's a big deal, I do think that having a conversation and at least saying, giving your loved one the permission or whoever would be responsible with the permission to do or not do is really helpful, because you just don't know if you don't know.
Yeah.
I agree entirely. For my mom, it wasn't pre-planned. And of course, with it being sudden, it was this scramble to figure out what to do. And even to this day, I'm like, I regret that I didn't do anything wrong, but I regret the decisions that I had to make because they weren't thought through. And at least with my dad, we were able to have the discussion. We were able to pre-plan it and feel a lot more comfortable with it. But now it's at this point of almost 6 years later that I'm going, okay, dad's had this celebration of life and he's being laid to rest this way, and mom is still sitting in 3 separate urns in my chest in my bedroom. And that I didn't get to do that peaceful, that finishing, because I didn't know what to do and how to go about it. That finally now, 6 years later, is the decision of, okay, when I'm buried, mom's ashes are going to be reinterred with mine, and that decision's made. But since she didn't have any planning, it just made it so difficult. So definitely, I think that made the grieving process a lot harder because I didn't have that final resting place for her.
Oh, that is absolutely so true, Brittany. That is so true. We, with my Care Right clients, that's part of that aging plan process, is getting your grab and go binder stuff done so that, when that death happens, or all the things that families need to know while their parents are alive, like accounts, passwords, long-term care insurance, all that kind of stuff, estate documents. But that funeral tab in the grab and go binder is so significant, because what happens is you get blindsided oftentimes by a death. And even if you don't get blindsided by a death, then you have all the business part of the death. You got to get all the death certificates. You got to notify all these people. You got to wrap up all the financial stuff and insurance and all that kind of stuff, and plan a funeral if the parents didn't already plan it. So you have all this business stuff. It takes all your time and energy, and it robs you of your ability to actually grieve. And so when the funeral comes around, your friends didn't, they do the right thing. They come and they comfort you, and then, they move on with their life. And by the time you can finally get through some of that business part of the death, that's when you really need a lot of support, and everybody's kind of moved on. And so that's where it gets really another peg of the grief journey, is just that isolation and loneliness, because again, nobody wants to really talk about grief, or they'll be like, well, that was 6 months ago, why are you still, people seem to think there should be a time frame on how long you should grieve, right? Have you guys seen that too?
It takes a while, and then it comes in waves, and they don't want to hear about it. Like, I died years ago, what does it matter now? And even with my dad, it was because it was anticipated and I was grieving it beforehand. It's, what are you upset about? This is coming. Well, just because I know it's coming doesn't make it any easier. I still realize I'm re-enlightened that I'm losing him.
Yeah. And I don't think people realize death is final. It's when they're gone, they're gone. There's no turning back from that. And that's another reason why I'm always encouraging families, if you have to clear the air, do that when everybody's competent and able to receive that message and have some hopeful dialogue instead of doing it at the deathbed and then not being able to really have that. I know I don't really like this word, but it's out there, closure that people need.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it just makes it that much harder.
Mm-hmm. You're in just talking about the planning and everything, and at 24, there was nothing planned for my
Yeah.
husband.
Yep.
And thankfully, I had my in-laws to help me with all of it. I just remember being escorted around by my father-in-law, and I actually stayed at their house because I couldn't stand to go into my house by myself. And
Sure.
when I went back, my mom came to stay with me for a couple of weeks because everything was a reminder.
Mm-hmm.
And what you said about the whew, the loneliness,
Mm-hmm.
I took a waitress job to get connected to people.
Yeah.
And luckily, the waitress I was working with had been a widow herself. So she ended up being like my mentor, angel, widow. A life can happen,
Mm-hmm.
and a role model. And she was so joyful. So having that and knowing that I have room in my heart for more than one person. It's
Sure.
harder with parents. I remember when my dad died, he had cancer, and the last visit I made to him and my mom, he was close to dying, but he made the effort to get out of bed, stand at the counter, smiling, even though I had a flight at like 6 a.m. He made sure that he was there to say goodbye and smile and say, I love you. So I have that. And he never wanted to talk about his plans at the end. My mom tried really hard, but now she has everything.
Yeah.
She's 95, still in her own place, but she has it all written out.
Yep.
Knows who's going to sing, who's going to read, what's going to be read,
Yep.
and
That's
everything.
a huge gift that she's given you.
Yes,
Well,
and I
that's what's going through this has taught me. All of my arrangements are made to the point that here's the flash drive for everything for the service. We're done. Like, and I'm 35 years old, but it just going through what I went through with both my parents. I'm like, there's no way I'm gonna let my family go through that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's often what the learning is, the takeaway, you know, is I'm not going to leave my family like that because it's just too hard and it's, you know, it's kind of unnecessary. So
Mhm.
what are some I wanted to share too, like any video you see me on, this is my locket. So I have my mom and my dad in here. And so this is like another thing that I use. Like I wear this literally every single day. And so do you have little trinket things like this that any of you use or anything like that?
I have a necklace. I forget which company it comes from, but it's a little tiny. I'm not wearing it today because I'm wearing my cross. But it's a little tiny heart, and you pick it up and you look through it, and you can see a photograph. And it's got a
Oh,
photograph of mom when I was a baby.
oh, that's cool. That sounds really cool.
So I'll wear that a lot. And then I have her ring that I wear every day.
Mm.
Yeah, that's actually what this is. My mom was a January baby, so she's a garnet, and I'm an April, so I'm a diamond. And so this is like my mom ring. And I wear this every day too. It's just, I don't know, for some people this stuff works. For me, this is the stuff that works. You know, everybody grieves differently or has their own kind of process that they use. Does anybody else want to share things that maybe you put in place that you kind of lean on every day?
Well, I think that's the key of like these trinkets are like, right? Nobody wants to be forgotten, and they surely don't want your loved one to be forgotten, right? So I got remarried the year after my pop died, and I have my grandmother's. He had treated her very well and got her all kinds of goodies all the time, and so they've gotten like vow renewals like 10 years before she died. So she got an upgrade ring. And so I actually used her ring to get married. So, almost on a daily basis, because it's a little bit unique. People are like, oh my gosh, let me see my ring. And I love to say it was my grandma's wedding ring. People are like, oh, you're kidding. That's amazing. But it's just that, like, don't ever forget. And I hope to be able to then pass it down to my daughter and, like have this be, oh, yeah, that was grandma's. So
Yeah. Oh, that is really special.
brings
That is,
me a lot of joy.
yeah. Yeah.
I don't have any trinkets or jewelry or anything, but I do have like a section in my living room where I have set up. I have my dad's a little container of his ashes, and then I have and then a picture of him holding me when I was little, and then I have a picture of my mom when she was younger. And then I also have my dad's hat because he was a soil conservationist and he worked with farmers, but he loved like the forest and nature, and so he always wore this hat that said "May the forest be with you," and so I have that sitting
Oh,
there.
that's cute.
And I love Star Wars too, so it just fits perfect.
That's cute.
Oh, for me, it's more experiential.
Hmm.
I found the thing that was my saving grace was walking after my husband died. Just getting out. I couldn't stay in the house. It was no matter what the weather was, I had to go out and just walk. And I would talk to myself and I would get
Yeah.
lost sometimes. And even today, I start my day with at least a half-hour walk.
Mhm.
It's just the time to be with myself and my thoughts and listen to the birds. The birds chirping are him.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's him talking to me, reminding me.
Hmm.
Hmm.
One of the things I did, so when I was little, my grandparents lived with us on the farm, and so because back in the 70s, if grandma and grandpa couldn't make it on their own at home, their only options, because we didn't have home care back then, so their only options were fail at home and die at home, move in with their kids, or move into a nursing home because we didn't have assisted living and all that kind of stuff. And so we had my mom's mom and my dad's dad, who were both widowed, living with us on the farm. And one of the things we always did, we had the tape recorders because that's what we had back then.
Hmm.
So we always recorded them sharing their stories. And so like as little kids, we would just interview grandma, interview grandpa. So we always had their stories on cassette tape. And to hear their stories of like my grandfather, my dad's dad was a blacksmith. And so to hear him share his stories, and my dad's mother died when my dad was 16 months old. And so my grandfather raised my dad and his four other siblings by himself and never remarried, or like he had married the love of his life and he never remarried. And so he had a tough go of it because he's five kids, I tell you, because I know them. They're my relatives. They gave him a run for his money. But we always recorded, Grandpa telling his stories, or at one point we did have a video recorder of him playing checkers with us and teaching us how to play checkers because that's the stuff that we grew up on back then. And so with my parents, I have hundreds of hours of me recording mom sharing her stories. Mom, what was your favorite memory from childhood? And with her dementia, that is where her memories were. So that's the blessing, if you will, of dementia, is I got to really understand mom's childhood and younger adult years better because that's where her memory was, right? Like she still knew me and she knew my dad and stuff, but like she could still recognize us, but there were like gaps of like she wouldn't be able to tell you what she did for a living and all because her memory was like back when she was little. And so it was really cool because with her dementia, she would light up. She became more childlike. And so she would light up when she would tell her stories of, her mother making her Easter dress and all that kind of stuff. So I have, like I said, lots of hours of recorded video of me interviewing my parents and how did you fall in love? Did you love dad right away? So I have all this stuff but it's still, after it took me over a year to be able to play any of those videos of mom, those recordings of mom, and I put them on Facebook. And so it's like, oh, this time 6 years ago, and it is very bittersweet, very bittersweet. Do either of you, or do any of you have a similar thing where you have these like videos or things like that at maybe in the beginning weren't very comforting, but now like that's what you go to?
I have one that I share every year on Facebook, but honestly, like I have cases that I can't even open. Like, so the one, because it was uploaded right before he passed, we bought a little putt-putt boat. We're close to the water, and we have this little smaller boat. And my grandpa had been on a boat since he was like 12 years old. He was like chartering boats and stuff. It was a crazy time in the 40s, right? And
Yeah.
so he got behind our little boat, and he was going so fast, and he couldn't see, like he's not seeing, my husband's standing next to him, and he is just flying across the water, and we're like in tears. This was like 6 weeks before he died. Why I let this frail little man on this boat, like hindsight, not a good idea whatsoever, but he's just laid back, flooring it, going like crashing down. We had a dog on the boat. It was total chaos. We couldn't, who knows what happened. But anyway, every year I share that. But then I have on the other side, all of the birthday parties of my kids growing up with my pop there, and I can't watch them, which is so sad. I really just need you girls to get me launched out to just dust those off and fire them up. But it's heartbreaking, it is. And I love your video. I love your tapes, Annalee. So sad that I don't have those, and I'm just gonna try to do more of that with everyone in my life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's yeah, I am so grateful that my parents taught us to do that with their parents when they lived with us. I'm so glad I carried that on as a tradition. And that's what I encourage my Care Right families to do. Like, take those videos, take those pictures, and because you won't be sorry. You won't be sorry.
I didn't have a lot of pictures of my mom the last 20 years. She hated her picture taken because of some childhood issues. So I have the pictures of young in my life as a baby, and like her wedding pictures and that. But the last few years, maybe a handful of pictures. With my dad, I made sure in the last couple of years to make memories. Like, I took him on cruises. I would take him for day trips, and I would take tons of pictures, clips of video, just almost every day, just pictures of any moment, because I just wanted to have that. And it was literally where I went through to do the celebration of life, and I had over 500 photos just of him the last 3 years.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what's really really cool, because then, it's a celebration of life. So you get to splatter all of these really cool pictures, and people get to, for those that maybe had lost touch or, whatever, they get to see really like how encompassing his life was and how happy he was.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about things that, let's talk about conversations, like responses. So things that people will say that they just, again, because, and that's why we're doing this podcast, right? Is to like open the doors of conversation. It can be uncomfortable, it can be dicey, it can be tricky. But what are some things that, and Marianne, you touched on this in the very beginning at the top of the podcast, but what are maybe some pretty safe to-dos or pretty safe things that could be said, that could be, in, for lack of better words, like a go-to thing to say, because we're all losing people as we get older, right? So what are maybe some safe, typically universal things that could be done or could be said that would be perceived as being comforting?
I say just to offer support, that you're there, even just there to listen. If you need somebody to talk to, I mean, that's the most that somebody can do that is so helpful. Not just say, you know, it was coming, or you'll get through this or that. That doesn't help. But just knowing that somebody is okay with just letting you vent, letting you talk, and that being a shoulder for you, that's the best thing.
Mhm.
I totally agree. I really, some people just never ask or don't talk about it, but there are those friends that, they come up or, just whenever they'll just say, "How was your mom?" And that means the world because you feel lonely a lot. So,
Yeah.
Like one of my friends who's actually one of my dad's aides and taking care of him, which has been helpful. Here just every couple days, text me, "What have you eaten? Have you eaten today?" And even just text me, like, "Send me a picture of your dinner tonight," just to make sure that I am getting through and not just going through that cycle of grief where I'm not taking care of myself. And that's helpful because it's no judgment. It's just being there to support me.
Mhm. Well, I think that I recommend, or I like to offer to, I invite people to go for a walk. You know, I
Yeah.
think walking and talking is a big thing, and just ask questions about, um, I just sort of open the door. Or I know that what I appreciated was being able to talk about my husband.
Mm-hmm.
Being, tell me your favorite story about him,
Mm-hmm.
or some of the stories we've shared about our loved ones, is just the favorite memories. And also offering to do the just the day-to-day stuff around the house. Like, if do you need anything at the store?
Yep.
It kind of like, Brittany, what you said with the caregiver, checking to make sure that you ate, or maybe even doing a food delivery for somebody for
Mm-hmm.
groceries, or if they know they have a dog,
Yep.
off, or even babysit if there are kids behind and there's nobody, you need a break.
Mm-hmm. It's a age-old thing, or maybe it's just because I'm from the Midwest and that's how we roll. But, bringing casseroles or food over was so huge. And I'm from Iowa, but I live, in down in like the Naples, Estero, Fort Myers area now. I haven't really been down here very long, but when mom died, my neighbors they just wrapped me in their arms. Because they knew that it was quite a journey, because this was all also during COVID, and it was just a god awful time for anyone who had, well, it was just a god awful time in general, but I
Mhm.
call it the COVID grief, right? Because it's, if you can't get in to see your loved one, and then you can't be there to be with them, and then they die prematurely or die unexpectedly, all that kind of stuff is just really, I call it COVID grief, and it's just like no other grief out there. I really feel that way, because we didn't, when you don't have a say and you don't have any control over wanting to be there for your loved one, um, COVID, the lockdown took a lot of that away from those of us would who would have normally have been able to be there. Um, but I think things that could be, helpful would be, what can I do to help you? What do you need me to bring to your house? My neighbors brought all sorts of food over. Dad and I didn't have to cook or anything for like over 2 weeks, because we just had so much food. And with mom's situation, because she had just started coming down to visit, and then all of her health issues and dementia progressed, they ended up living here with me. From what went from like what was going to be a 2 week stay to get out of the Iowa weather was like a five year stay. And it was so amazing to be able to have those last few years with her. And obviously my dad too, he turns 87 next month, so I'll be flying up to Iowa for his birthday party. But things that were difficult were that when you're like, when my mom went into the hospital after she fell here at the house, because most of these healthcare workers in hospitals are not trained in dementia care and understanding how to anticipate needs and how to redirect behaviors and all that kind of stuff, Dad was spending like the first few hours of the day up with mom at the hospital so that I could at least keep billable time on my calendar. As a business owner, I needed to be, and a single business owner, I need to be able to make money. And so dad would take like the morning shift. So I moved all of my clients into like morning hours. So then I would go up in the afternoon and relieve dad so he could come back here to the house and rest. And then I would stay until midnight when the security guard at the hospital would walk me out because he's like, well, now you have to go. And I'm like, I don't trust you guys to take care of my mom overnight. And so anyway, the security guard would have to usher me out every night. And what happened was 2 weeks after my mom fell, and she was the night that she was being admitted into a skilled rehab unit for PT, physical therapy and occupational therapy from her fall injury. My dad and I were getting her situated into the rehab center and like unpacking her. And it was, right before Christmas. So it was like December 18th was the night that the hospital discharged her into a rehab unit. And I'm unpacking mom's bag and I'm like, Dad, we need to go and get a Christmas tree because she was clearly going to be at the facility over Christmas, and just kind of making out a shopping list. And I'm like handing it to him while I'm also like trying to unpack her because this is like 8 o'clock at night because that's when the hospital discharged her. And I look over because he's not responding. He's not like taking the list. He's not answering me at all. And I look over and he's unresponsive. He was actually having a stroke. So at that very moment when I looked over and I'm like, oh my God, Dad's not responsive, because he was having a stroke. At that very moment, the nurses come in and they're like, you both need to leave because we have to do your mom's skin assessment. And I'm like, Dad's not responsive. And she's like, we can't help you with that. And I'm like, and my dad is like 6'1". And so she's like, well, you got to get him into a wheelchair, call 911, and then you need to get him up to the front desk. We can't help you with any of that.
Oh,
And so I am like trying to transfer my dad, who's literally unresponsive. I'm trying to get him out of the chair into the wheelchair. We calling 911 on my phone, wheeling, like running to the front door of the facility so that I can meet the paramedics. Paramedics were on their way. I'm calling my brother and I'm like, oh my God, dad is unresponsive. I've got mom who's kind of freaked out because she's in this strange environment, which is terrible for dementia patients. She's in this strange environment. I've got to be with dad, and this is like right before COVID, and I'm the only one down here. My siblings are all up north. And so what happened, thank God dad ended up being okay. But I mean, it's hard because you got one parent in the hospital over here, and then 45 minutes over here, you got your mom in a facility, and she's like totally having a mental breakdown because she's like, where's my, she's calling out for me. She's calling out for my dad, and she's scared. And so there for like 4 weeks, it was just, well, it was longer than that, but it was like total chaos. And I didn't get to the store. I didn't get anything. And so my refrigerator just totally stunk, right? Like spoiled milk.
Yeah.
So when we talk about like, how could people help you when you're in like the throes of crises and, not even always death, but like that situation that I talked about, like when a family is in the throes of like health issues with their parents or death, it's really helpful. Like what would have been helpful for me was someone to check my mail, go get my mail, clean out my refrigerator, get some fresh food in there so that when I am home, I can actually have something to eat instead of Cheetos, which I'm not complaining because that's like 90% of my diet, but like it would have been nice to have options. But anyway, like those are some like clear things that you can do. Someone could water your plants,
Gosh, walk the dog. Yeah.
walk the dog. Yeah. Yeah. So thankfully, my fiance is down here. And so he's like, well, I'll take Reggie, my dog. So he had him for like 2 or 3 weeks because I was just in and out all the time. And so he took my dog. But like all of those things, like all of the things that you do every day, you should have those jotted down and be like, okay, this is what I need help with. Who can help me? Because sometimes, when we do say an open statement of, how can I help you? Well, people don't think about those things. So if we can give them specific tasks, like here's my mailbox key,
Yeah. Well,
Uh,
yeah, I think
all those.
it's also hard to ask about, ask someone to do some of those mundane things. I would feel horrible asking somebody to clean out my refrigerator.
Yep. Yep.
See, I
Yeah.
was lucky came and did that stuff. They're like, we can see you need help. We know you're not going to ask for it. You don't know what to ask for. So like my friend came over and just did laundry on Sundays and took out the trash for me and
Yep.
stuff.
Yeah.
Yep.
I do remember people going through the house and just taking control, you
Mm-hmm.
know, doing what they knew needed to be done.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's
And
important to be able to accept the help too, because we always think I can do it all, it's fine, or you don't want to bug people, but yeah, not the time.
Yeah. So, giving people kind of a list, like, bringing over food or picking up the mail, those kind of things. And also, you know, what would be helpful is if someone said, well, what do you need from me? Because that can also be an easy way to say, well, mail, water my plants, clean out,
Mhm.
not necessarily clean out my fridge, but sort of like get rid of the milk. um, and just, like you said in the beginning, Marianne, just, sit there and listen. You don't have to even say anything, but just giving a hug or taking someone by the hand and putting your hand on a grieving person. And I'm here for you for whatever you need.
Mhm.
Um, and that you don't always have to say anything either, just that touch
Yeah.
or that text, like what you were talking about, Brittany, that text, like, hey,
Mhm.
just who you ate today.
Yeah. There was someone I knew who had experienced a miscarriage and how devastated she was. And anytime she came across anyone who had experienced a miscarriage, she would set a reminder to get in touch with them every month
Yep.
on that date, just so she would check to see how they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Just have that touch point. I know this must be a hard day for you. I'm here if you want to talk. So I think that's a great thing to do something without even being asked.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking of you today, or on Mother's Day or Father's Day, reaching out and having that be a hug, virtual hugs.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I think sometimes we feel like our loved one's been forgotten, or our grief has been forgotten, or our loss has been forgotten. And so I like those little touch points. I'll do that too with some of the families that I work with too. I'll text or reach out, or I'll do even like a general blanket statement on Facebook or LinkedIn, like, to all of those who are missing a loved one today. I mean, I get tons of, like, people respond to that because everybody's going through it. They're just
Yeah.
not talking about it. In the last few minutes, we talked about some helpful things that could be said or done, like just touching or listen, giving a hug or sending a text or going on a walk with someone. Those are really helpful things. What do you need from me? How can I help you? Or I'm here for you. Just like those are pretty, I think, safe responses. What are some unhelpful things that people have said to you that maybe we can do some awareness of, maybe what not to say because it doesn't land how maybe the person who said it thought it would? So what are some less great responses that you've had?
At least they're out of pain. They're better off. Um, it could be worse. They could just be here in a wheelchair. Um, it's God's plan. I'm a very religious person, but I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
In retrospect, I can see how my life is different because of that. But at the time, that is not the thing to say.
Mm-hmm.
It hurts too much.
I guess for me, it's because my mom has a lot of hallucinations and delusions. She oftentimes makes up crazy stories. And so even some of the caregivers or some people, when I tell them it, they laugh because yeah, it's funny. But, and like sometimes, yeah, I can laugh about it too, but it's kind of one of those things. It's like, I can laugh about it, but you can't laugh about that because that's my mom. And it's, it's not funny, it's something that she's going through and it's hard. And so that has been not helpful. And then also, I think a lot of people assume because she's in memory care, oh, she's taken care of, and not, and caregiving is hard. Like if somebody's doing it in the home, not disrespecting that at all, but just for people to think that I'm not doing anything at this point is, not the right response. It's like, I'm still her caregiver. I'm still there all the time. I'm taking care of all of her broken glasses or her expired license or whatever, I'm still her caregiver. Even though, she's in memory care.
Yeah, I think I'm glad you brought that up, Jennifer, because just yesterday I was talking to a professional who should have known better. And he's like, well, she should be, we were talking about a client and he was a financial advisor and he's like, well, she should be doing just fine now because she moved her mom into a facility. So like she doesn't have to do anything anymore. And I was like, no, now your advocacy has just begun. Because if you're not there all the time, making sure that they're taking care of them properly and getting, spotting that urinary tract infection proactively instead of when she's already septic and half dead because they miss the symptoms. You're caregiving. You're just at a different level because now you have to be there to make sure that things are going how they should be and coordinating, potentially some doctor's appointments and tracking down that missing blue sweater that they just can't seem to
Exactly.
in the room.
Yeah. Laundry basket. I don't know. The calls at 2 a.m. because she's out of control, which was a UTI, and
Yeah. So yeah, you're a caregiver no matter where your loved one lives. You are still a caregiver. So any other kind of unhelpful comments that have been said to anybody else?
I'll come from like not having a great relationship or being estranged when someone passed away. I think that there are times when people think that they want to be on my team and maybe criticize the person who had passed.
Sure.
That's my relationship, and there's still this very weird, like I still feel protective over the dysfunction. And so I think you have to be, careful. I loved a lot of the advice that you gave of what to say, but I also think not necessarily thinking that you can put yourself in their shoes and criticizing is not the way to go.
Right. Criticism, putting their opinion out there. Because I could just see someone saying, well, you weren't that close anyway, right? Yep. Yep.
Or even putting their own grief of the situation in front of yours, like prioritizing it as if it's bigger and more important than what you're actually going through when you're the direct person with the loss.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it's almost like people comparing their illnesses. Oh, you think, oh, my grief, oh, it was so much worse for me, Yeah, that's a good one, Brittany.
Yeah, or like this with my dad, like his knee, oh, it was my uncle, my favorite uncle, and this and that. It's like, well, this is my father. Like, seriously, I don't want to hear it.
Yeah.
I remember a divorced friend telling me that it was worse for her because her ex was still around.
Yeah.
I said, okay.
Yeah. I just, people just, they don't know what to say. So they just say whatever. And then I don't know if maybe later they're like, wow, that was really awful to say. Like I shared on our kind of pre-recorded session of just things that I've been responded with or have had people say to me was, because my mom had dementia and she choked to death. And so I've had people say, well, those workers did you a favor because they ended her misery or ended her suffering, or just just things like that that really are not helpful. Or it's been 3 years, how come you're still struggling? Or like I said in the beginning, like people put this like in undetermined time limit on how long we're supposed to be sad. I don't care if it's 4 minutes ago, 4 years ago, or 4 decades ago. A grief is a grief. And so just hopefully these conversations at least open the door of thought, and maybe how to differently support someone that's going through a grief journey, and knowing that there's no deadline on how long you're gonna feel sad and miss your you're gonna miss them until you pass away, right? So some days are better than others. Those grief bursts. I remember walking into a grocery store. Sunflowers are just something that's going to trigger me, because that was mom's flower that we had her room decorated in. And so at the front table of the grocery store, there was like sunflowers all over. And all of a sudden I just burst out in tears, and I just put my cart away and left. Because there was like no groceries for me tonight, because I go through the grocery store sobbing, and you look like you're a crazy person because people don't know what's going on. So
at the grocery store, I remember the first Thanksgiving without my mom, I couldn't decide if I wanted to do takeout or cater or actually cook it myself. And I decided finally, screw the moment, I'm going to go to the store. I'm going to get everything. I'm going to cook it myself. I got to the checkout. All the stuff's I just completely just blanked out and almost passed out. I was overwhelmed by it. Asher's just looking at me like, lady, what the hell is your problem?
yeah. Yep.
It just hit me at that point. Oh, this is Thanksgiving and mom's not here.
Yeah. 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 All those holiday traditions changed, Mom did all the cooking, until her dementia took over, to the point where she couldn't follow recipes and stuff like that. And then my dad took over all her roles of, the cooking and, some of the cleaning, because they're in the 80s. So that was kind of divvied up like that. So he had his roles at the house, plus now mom's and driving and all that kind of stuff. And so just, there's just grief everywhere we look, whether the person has passed away or they have a dementia, chronic disease that is taking who they were and who they are away from them and away from us every day. So there's grief is abound. So in closing, is there anything else that we want to talk about, or do we feel like we've covered it pretty well?
I'll say one more thing, and I heard what Brittany said, and I can't imagine like somebody comparing their grief to mine, but I also just want to say that, other people are very much in different stages of their mental health and grief. I hear a lot of comments like, it's been a year, or did they really know him that long, or she divorced him 10 years ago. And people do grieve very differently at very different times, and maybe there's other stuff that they're going through in their life, or aren't as I don't together, right? Like there might be something completely different going on, and then they lose somebody that maybe they didn't have a chance to say something or apologize. And sometimes I do step back and like, I wonder what that's all about. But be nice for everybody to just give other people just a little bit of grace when, different levels of grief. And for me personally, with going back and having regret or guilt, I just try to also extend grace to those that are no longer here and can't do things differently, and just know that we all did the best that we could at the time that we were doing it. And, you don't get the chance to do it a second time.
Yep. Yep. Well said. Very well said, Mary. All right. Well, I really, really, from the bottom of my heart, I really appreciate your willingness to, be vulnerable, share your story. Hopefully, hopefully you'll be okay tonight, because sometimes this can, stimulate some other issues. So I just want to say thank you so much for sharing your story, being willing to participate, and making a difference in the lives of other people who are grieving, and those who are just like, oh, I want to say something, I just don't know what to say. And so this hopefully shed some important information, and shed some light on that it's okay to talk about grief. Those of us in the grief journey are probably pretty isolated, feeling probably a little bit alone, because of the culture of not wanting to, the society's not wanting to really delve into grief work. So hopefully this was helpful. And thank you, each and every one of you, so much for being a part of this today.
Thank you, Annalee, for having us,
Organizing it.
for doing this. Yeah.
Yep, this might very well be a series that we do. So very good. Well, thank you so much, everybody. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Take care, ladies.
You too.
Take care. Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to the Care Right podcast. We hope today's discussion has provided you with valuable insights. If so, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share our podcast with others who might find it helpful. Remember, Care Right is more than just a podcast. It's a community dedicated to supporting family caregivers with comprehensive care planning, crisis management, and resources for every stage of aging. Stay connected with us for future episodes as we continue to explore essential topics in aging planning, elder care, and financial planning. Until next time, take care, plan wisely, and remember, you're not alone in your caregiving journey.